I've learned something most will never see. Something whispered in shadows, hidden beneath polite smiles and polite nods. What if I told you you could guide anyone's thoughts without them ever realizing it? That the power to bend, to steer, to quietly unravel their certainty doesn't belong to the loud, the brash, the obvious, but to the one who watches, listens, and waits. I've seen it. That flicker in her eye when a word, a pause, a glance nudges her closer. Closer to the edge of obedience she doesn't know she's teetering on. There's a rhythm to it, a silent cadence. Every action, every silence is a thread, and I've become a master at weaving them. The streets I walk are quiet in comparison to the war waged in the mind. The war where subtlety wins and brute force is a fool's weapon. Betrayal doesn't arrive with fanfare. It arrives in whispers, in hesitations, in the almost imperceptible shifts in tone and glance. You learn to recognize it, to anticipate it, to manipulate it, before it can consume you, and obsession. That slow, creeping hunger that some feel unknowingly, it can be coaxed, guided, and if you understand the laws, controlled. The laws are invisible, unspoken, but absolute. Law 1, attention is power. Law 2, withdrawal is control. Law 3, predictability kills desire. I'm not telling you this to shock you. I'm telling you this because few ever see the architecture of influence. Few understand that emotional gravity can be wielded like a blade, quiet, precise, and unavoidable. Tonight, you will see what I see. You will learn to recognize the currents beneath the smiles, the tensions beneath polite words, and perhaps, by the end, you will understand how invisible rules shape hearts, twist intentions, and command obedience before anyone even notices. I remember the first time I realized how malleable people truly are, how easily a glance, a pause, or a shift in tone could bend intention, sway desire, or ignite obsession. It was not in a grand moment of revelation, but in the quiet, mundane spaces where attention drifts and vigilance falters. A dimly lit cafe, a corridor between offices, a hallway where footsteps echo too loudly, betraying a thought not yet spoken. People crave acknowledgement. They crave validation. It is their weakness, their secret pulse, and it beats predictably. I watched her once, unaware of my gaze, as her eyes searched for reassurance in another's nod, a fleeting smile, the brush of a hand that said, "Yes, you are seen." Her voice rose and fell, calibrated to the response she expected. Soft, where she wished to appear innocent, sharp when she tested for interest, and all the while I had no power, only observation. I was blind once, too blind. I trusted easily. I assumed transparency in others, honesty in intention. But the mind has its own hunger. People are architects of subtle games, weaving layers, of manipulation over laughter and civility. They lie not out of malice but instinct, survival, the quiet pursuit of advantage. And I, untrained, walked into their currents, pulled along by unseen tides, unaware of the law that governed all human motion. Until I learned. The first law is observation. It is not merely looking, it is seeing. Not merely hearing, it is understanding. Observation is patience, immersion in the unspoken, the flicker of an eyelid, the half-step backward, the hesitation before a word leaves the mouth. It is noting who defers, who challenges, who craves attention, who recoils from proximity. It is collecting evidence in silence, assembling patterns, discerning the invisible rules that guide their behavior. There is a tension in knowing these truths, in recognizing the architecture of influence around you. Desire to intervene battles with moral hesitation. I found myself questioning each thought, each action. Am I guiding or am I corrupting? And then I realized It is not corruption to recognize a pattern, to apply the laws of influence. It is power. It is survival. The psychological environment is a constant web of tension and curiosity. One look can ignite fascination. One silence can stoke suspicion. Trust is fragile, obsession easily seeded, intentions manipulated before words are even spoken. A raised brow, a momentary withdrawal, the softest sigh, they speak volumes to the one who watches. And in this space the stakes are absolute. One misstep, one failure to recognize the invisible cues, and you are lost in their currents, carried by their desires, consumed by what you do not yet understand. Dim rooms, lingering looks, silences heavy with meaning. This is the theater where influence is performed. It is not force that commands attention, it is presence, understanding, and the subtle orchestration of emotion. Observation becomes a weapon, an armor, a lens through which you navigate human desire without revealing your own. I was once adrift, unaware, powerless. Now, armed with the first law, I am aware, present, and deliberate. I have seen the currents beneath casual smiles, the secret calculations behind polite gestures, and I have learned that knowing these laws changes everything. A single look, a well-timed pause, a carefully measured response. It can shift the trajectory of a mind, bend will, awaken curiosity, and plant the seeds of silent obsession. It begins with seeing, with noticing, with understanding. And in that act, the first law is fulfilled, the silent, unrelenting observation that precedes all influence. I watch them move through the world, unaware of how easily their emotions betray them. A flicker in the corner of the eye, the brief hesitation before a word is spoken, the subtle shift in tone when uncertainty creeps in. These are the currents that carry their intentions. I notice them all. Every twitch, every pause, every involuntary gesture becomes a thread in the tapestry of understanding I am weaving. And yet, with each observation, I feel the weight of my own vulnerability. I am drawn into their rhythms, pulled by curiosity, by longing, by the desire to exert control over what once controlled me. I remember my own frustration, the nights I lay awake, replaying encounters, analyzing every glance, every slip, every unintended reveal. I was naive, desperate for mastery, blind to the cost of the obsession I was cultivating. There is fascination in it, the quiet thrill of noticing patterns no one else sees, of mapping emotional landscapes that feel infinite and unknowable. And there is fear, the fear that someone else notices you, that the currents of another mind could ensnare you just as easily as you ensnare them. Desire mingles with dread, a slow burning tension that tightens the chest and sharpens perception. It is intoxicating, painful, and necessary. I begin to see the small signs in others. The tilt of a head signaling insecurity, the subtle shift in vocal cadence hinting at concealed intent, the micro-expressions that betray fleeting thoughts. Some move with practiced deceit, others with unconscious honesty, but all leave traces. And these traces, invisible to most, are the very proof of their predictability, their manipulability. The second law reveals itself. The key is silent awareness. Not action, not force, not confrontation, but the patient, deliberate immersion in the moment. Watching without revealing, listening without responding, feeling without revealing your own agitation. Awareness is the currency of influence. It is the lens through which all strategies are measured. When you remain unseen, your power grows quietly, inexorably, like shadows stretching across a room as the sun sets. But awareness carries a cost. Obsession seeps in unbidden. I find myself returning to the same memories, replaying the same glances, the same pauses, extracting meaning like water from stone. I analyze, I decode, I internalize. The emotional burden is mine alone, a weight I bear in silence while my understanding expands. Every moment of restraint, every hesitation to act, is a small victory, a step closer to mastery. Mastery begins not with domination, but with patience. Restraint is the crucible in which influence is forged. To act too soon is to reveal weakness, to disclose desire. To speak too eagerly is to surrender power. And so, I wait, I observe, I learn. The minds around me pulse with unconscious signals, and in those signals I see the architecture of control. I am vulnerable, yes. I am frustrated, longing for certainty and sway. Yet through silent awareness, through relentless observation, I begin to internalize power. I am learning to move within the currents without disturbing them, to guide without imposing, to be both present and invisible. And in that quiet mastery, a slow transformation begins, an understanding that the first step to control is not in commanding others, but in commanding yourself. Influence is never blunt. It is never obvious. It lives in subtleties, in the pauses between words, in the silences that stretch long enough to make someone question their own certainty. I learn to guide without leaving a trace, to bend perception without touching it. The strategy is simple in principle, devastating in effect, yet it demands patience, precision, and a relentless attention to the human pulse. The first step is mirroring. Not mimicry, not obvious copying, but the quiet reflection of their emotional state, posture, tone, and tempo. In a quiet dinner, I lean back when she leans back, soften my voice when hers softens, pause when she pauses. She doesn't notice. It is instinctual. She feels understood, acknowledged, subtly aligned with my presence. Through this alignment, curiosity grows, trust deepens, and influence begins its invisible ascent. Next comes withdrawal. A small distance, a fleeting absence, a delayed reply. Scarcity creates value, and desire thrives in what is not always given. I learn to leave a seat empty at the table, to step back in conversation, to let silence do the work words cannot. She wonders. She anticipates. She reaches for what is temporarily denied. It is the deliberate creation of longing, the crafting of emotional gravity without a single demand. Strategic reinforcement is equally potent. Compliments, encouragement, or acknowledgement are given sparingly, always calculated. Too often, people overshare validation, flood attention, and weaken desire. But when the recognition is rare, meaningful, precisely timed, it becomes a signal of power, a cue that draws them closer, quietly tethering their interest to your presence. And above all, attention must be guided, not imposed, not forced, but directed like a hand tracing an unseen line. A subtle touch to the shoulder, a fleeting glance that lingers, a pause before a response. These are the small strokes of influence, the brushwork of a master painter on the canvas of human emotion. Here emerges Law 3, mirror to guide, withdraw, to create longing. It is not cruelty, it is architecture. One reflects to teach, one retreats to intrigue, one shapes without pressure, molds without confrontation. It is the invisible hand that steers desire while appearing absent, the quiet force that shifts priorities without announcement. Yet the mind resists, even as the strategy succeeds. Ethics and effectiveness clash. I have asked myself, am I manipulating, corrupting, exploiting? The answer is neither simple nor comforting. Influence is a mirror of self-control. The more deliberate, patient, and restrained I am, the more undeniable my power becomes. The art is in waiting, in allowing subtle nudges to accumulate into observable shifts. One does not hurry mastery. One cultivates it slowly, like fire under ash, unseen but potent. Cinematic examples unfold constantly. A dinner where my silence amplifies her curiosity, a conversation where my reflection of her words heightens trust, a gesture so slight it is almost invisible, yet it redirects attention and desire. Influence is never declared. It is recognized only after its effects have taken root, long after the mind has internalized the sway. Control, when executed this way, is invisible yet undeniable. She moves differently, wonders differently, even doubts differently, without ever knowing I set the patterns, arranged the currents, or planted the seeds. And in that quiet mastery I find the paradox of power. It is strongest when unseen, most effective when unclaimed, and absolute when exercised with patience, precision, and awareness. The tension begins quietly, almost imperceptibly, like the hush before a storm. A lingering glance across a crowded room, a slight hesitation in response to a question, a smile that arrives a fraction of a second too late. Each interaction becomes a test, a subtle probe to see where boundaries lie, to measure curiosity, to ignite desire. Nothing is overt, everything is calculated, and yet each micro-movement pulses with possibility. She does not see it. She feels it. The unpredictability of my presence, the careful alternation between engagement and withdrawal, creates a rhythm she cannot resist. One moment I am fully attentive, leaning into her words, mirroring her laughter, softening my voice to match her cadence. The next, I retreat into silence, allowing absence to emphasize my presence, letting scarcity weave longing through her thoughts. These small fluctuations are invisible, yet they tighten the emotional grip without her awareness. Obsession begins quietly, too, like a shadow that grows when no one is watching. I watch her curiosity deepen, her subtle gestures betraying preoccupation, her eyes searching for confirmation in places I am not. The emotional entanglement is silent, almost sacred in its intensity. She seeks patterns, tries to anticipate my behavior, to predict my intentions, but each miscalculation draws her closer to the architecture of influence I have built. Law 4 emerges. Emotions are tools, not truths. Every glance of longing, every flicker of frustration, every sigh or soft laugh is a signal, not a confession. They are pieces of a puzzle, instruments of leverage, not proof of honesty. I learn to wield them, to channel fixation, to guide desire, and to quietly reshape perception without ever revealing my hand. And yet, there is the thrill and the fear. The thrill of noticing her micro-reactions, the subtle shifts that confirm my influence. The thrill of understanding her intentions before she can articulate them. But with it comes the fear of exposure. One misstep, one ill-timed gesture, and the illusion collapses. She would see me for what I am, not a lover, not a friend, not a confidant, but a strategist, a manipulator, an unseen hand shaping the currents around her. Betrayal becomes visible in its patterns, even when unspoken. Everyone has weaknesses. Everyone reacts, falters, hesitates. I have learned to see them, catalog them, and test them without cruelty. A fleeting insecurity, a need for validation, a longing for attention, all become points of leverage in a slow, inexorable push toward emotional alignment. My detachment is both armor and instrument. I feel, I observe, yet I remain untouchable, unclaimed, the axis around which obsession spins. Cinematic moments punctuate the tension. A dinner, shadows flickering across the table, the clink of silverware, punctuating pauses loaded with meaning. Half-heard confessions slip into my awareness, murmured too softly to register fully, yet recorded in memory, analyzed and stored for strategic use. Lingering glances, almost imperceptible, are magnified in the mind of the observer. Silent nudges, gentle shifts of position, deliberate omissions, All become threads in the tapestry of influence, gradually tightening until desire cannot resist the pattern. Scarcity and attention amplify the effect. A delayed message, a subtle withdrawal of presence, a fleeting moment of eye contact becomes monumental. Emotional pull grows quietly, almost dangerously, as she begins to anticipate, to wonder, to seek the rhythm I set. And yet she remains, unaware of the orchestration, believing her thoughts are her own, while in truth they are responding to the invisible hand guiding them. I feel the power, yes, but also the responsibility. Influence is intoxicating, control tempts. Yet each small victory carries weight, the emotional cost of obsession, the quiet, ethical tension of guiding without revealing. And still, the slow burn is deliberate. Patience is absolute. A single misstep can fracture trust, dissolve intrigue, or awaken resistance. To move too quickly is to lose the delicate balance. To act too overtly is to betray the invisible architecture that governs desire. In these moments, I see it clearly. Attention, scarcity, and subtle nudges are not just tactics. They are life itself in motion. The micro-patterns, the half-glances, the fleeting confessions, they coalesce into a rhythm of control, quiet and undeniable, invisible yet potent. She does not know it yet, but she is caught in a current that flows according to my understanding, guided by the laws she will never fully see. And in the center of this tension, I stand, both participant and observer, both human and architect, feeling the thrill, the fear, and the intoxicating gravity of silent mastery. It is a delicate dance, a shadowed symphony of obsession, and it has only just begun. The moment of realization comes quietly, almost imperceptibly in the stillness after a long game of unspoken maneuvering. I see it in her reactions. The slight hesitation before she speaks, the unguarded glance, the almost imperceptible tension in posture. Everything aligns with the patterns I have observed, the triggers I have mapped, the subtle nudges I have placed. In this moment, mastery feels both intoxicating and lonely, a pinnacle achieved in silence. Law 5 declares itself with clarity. The unseen hand guides everything. No force, no overt demand, no declaration of intent, just the quiet orchestration of circumstance, emotion, and attention. I am no longer merely reacting. I am shaping outcomes before they surface, arranging interactions so subtly that she believes her desires are her own, her choices independent, her curiosities spontaneous. Yet every path she takes flows along lines I have traced in shadow. Human psychology is mercilessly predictable. Every hesitation, every micro-expression, every flicker of doubt or desire is a signal, a key to influence. I see dependencies forming. The quiet reliance on attention, the anticipation of engagement, the craving for validation that I administer sparingly. She does not know it, cannot know it, but she is drawn into an orbit of emotional gravity that I control without confrontation. The power of subtlety is absolute. Influence unseen is influence eternal. The mind believes it is autonomous, even as it obeys. Cinematic moments unfold in internal reflection. I recall the quiet dinners, the conversations punctuated by silence, the fleeting touches that speak volumes. Each a victory unnoticed, each a pattern etched into the rhythm of attention. I feel the thrill of strategy fulfilled, the satisfaction of observation transformed into undeniable influence. And yet the cost is tangible. Detachment is inevitable. Obsession, even quiet and controlled, consumes attention and isolates. Power is intoxicating, but it is a solitary companion. One can guide, shape, and dominate, yet remain unseen, unclaimed, and fundamentally alone. I sense the culmination of All the laws in practice. Observation, silent awareness, mirroring, withdrawal, emotional manipulation, patience, scarcity, they converge into a single truth. Subtlety is ultimate mastery. Control need not be shouted, it need not be flaunted. Its permanence lies in invisibility, in the mind's unconscious alignment with the hand that guides without recognition. To act openly is to forfeit influence. To dominate with presence alone is to reveal weakness. The true apex of power is imperceptible, absolute, and intoxicating. I reflect on the implications: relationships shaped without coercion, ambitions guided without confrontation, alliances secured through understanding rather than force. Influence becomes a lens through which the world is navigated, a currency more potent than charm, more enduring than authority, more lethal than outrage. Every interaction becomes a subtle negotiation of attention and desire, a choreography where emotion bends to strategy and the unseen hand ensures outcomes before they are ever voiced. And in the quiet aftermath, I feel both the triumph and the solitude. Mastery is not loud, it is not celebrated, it is an intimate victory, hidden from view, carried in the silence of comprehension, etched into the patterns of behavior I have guided. I have reached the apex of influence without revealing the architecture of control, and the intoxicating truth remains. Those who believe they act freely are often merely dancing to rhythms they cannot see, directed by hands they cannot perceive. The unseen hand guides everything. And in understanding that, I grasp the final lesson of silent mastery. Power, like shadow, is strongest when unnoticed, and its permanence is secured not through assertion, but through the patient, deliberate shaping of desire and attention. True, control is rarely seen. It is quiet, patient, and strategic. It resides not in overt action, not in forceful assertion, but in the invisible threads woven through observation, reflection, and restraint. Those who believe they act freely often move according to rhythms they cannot perceive. Influence is not loud. It is subtle, deliberate, and enduring. The laws that guide this understanding are deceptively simple, yet profoundly powerful. Observation reveals patterns. Silent awareness cultivates patience. Mirroring guides. Withdrawal creates longing. Emotional signals are tools, not truths. And the unseen hand ensures that outcomes follow intent, without declaration or confrontation. Mastery is not granted, it is built slowly, quietly, one calculated moment at a time. Patience is the crucible of influence. Force invites resistance. Haste undermines intention. Subtlety is the architect of permanence. In every interaction, every glance, every pause, power can be exercised without detection, shaping desire, curiosity, and attention. The world bends more to strategy than to overt command, more to understanding than to coercion. Those who grasp this truth navigate relationships, ambitions, and alliances with an almost imperceptible authority that is absolute and lasting. Yet mastery carries a price: detachment, solitude, and the quiet obsession required to maintain awareness are not without cost. Every victory is tinged with isolation. Every subtle manipulation demands vigilance, reflection, and restraint. Power tempered with awareness is the only form of mastery that endures. The intoxication of influence is inseparable from the solitude it often necessitates. One cannot guide minds endlessly without a constant presence in the silent spaces of thought, without a steady hand that balances ambition with patience, observation with discretion. If you have absorbed these lessons, the next step will take you deeper. You will learn not only to observe, influence, and guide, but to bend minds entirely, without detection, without conflict, and without ever revealing the currents you command. The first rules are merely the foundation, the architecture of complete, silent control awaits. Remember this: the strongest influence is the one no one recognizes. The most permanent power is the one exercised unseen. And mastery, no matter how intoxicating, is inseparable from the solitude it demands. Listen to the silence. Watch the currents. Let desire move where you guide it, unseen. And in that quiet orchestration, you will discover a truth few ever recognize. Control is invisible, patient and absolute.